feel like driving?
I didn't feel like, you
Oh,
say,
okay.
driver. I could concentrate. So Malcolm said he would drive, and we drove to the home to pick up Shaka and Kanini. And when we got into the car, I told her something had happened to their dad, and Kanini said, "He's dead, isn't he?" I said, "Yes."
Dr. Rodney, just for the record, you have to state what's the full name of Father Malcolm?
Father Malcolm Rodney.
Yes, you have the name.
We used to call him the rebel priest. He always wore a hat like chain.
So you then,
We
asked the
then,
question and you told them.
yes, and we proceeded to the house. And as soon as I got to my house, my parents told me that Walter's parents had called to say that they were searching her house and that they had arrested Eddie. And I told
Just for the record, just tell us who Eddie is.
Eddie is Walter's older brother, Edward Rodney. And I told my mother-in-law I would try to get in touch with her lawyer and to show that they were okay. And it was about 15 minutes later when two vans drove up to the house. The Colt vans and a Land Rover, and there were a number of plainclothes people that came up on the front steps and said they were the police, and they had come to search for arms and ammunition. And I asked the one who seemed to be the leader if he would allow me to contact my lawyer, and he said, you know, they were here to do their job and that he was not prepared to wait. And they were all armed. I mean, it was as if they were going into battle with these batons and these long rifles. Malcolm told me that he would stay with the children and that I should accompany these men around the house to make sure that they didn't leave anything or take anything, which is what I did.
The next sentence there, while conducting the search, one of the men asked, "Where is your husband?" And then looked at one of the other guys and smiled. What did you understand from that look? What did you think? What was your perception of this interaction between these two men?
That they already knew that Walter was dead. And I don't know why they were asking the question. And I said to them, maybe you should tell me what happened to my husband. And he got very annoyed in his response and said, "What do you mean by that?" My children were terrified, especially my youngest daughter. And it wasn't an ordinary search. They were tossing things around. They were pulling out drawers. It was very confusing, stressful situation. They went to the dining room table where all of Walter's papers were laid out, and they thought they had discovered some plan. They didn't even know they were history papers. They were just very excitable. And then they went into my son's room, and into my son's room, he had a huge poster of Che Guevara. And the policeman, one who said to the other, even the child has a portrait of she on its wall. And my son was going to say something, and I said, "No, Shaka, don't say anything."
That's very correct.
They also searched my parents' home downstairs, although they were separate apartments. After they left, I tried to make sure that the place was in a timely situation so I could get the children ready for bed. While Mark was making some calls to find out if he could remain with us that night. So Malcolm did stay at the house with us that night.
The next section of your statement, also on page 17, you describe the days after that. What was your focus, first of all, during the course of the next few days?
The next few days was my concern for my children, to make sure that I could arrange to view Walter's body because pamphlets were thrown outside our house very early that morning, indicating that it was an unidentified man who had been killed.
That's the morning of the 14th of June, 1980.
Yes.
Looking at your second paragraph there, around 9 a.m., your older sister,
Yes.
Mrs. Mavis Shepherd, known as Sister May,
Yes.
arrived at your home with a bag of blood-stained clothes. I recognized them as the clothes Walter was wearing the previous evening. My sister was the manager of a religious bookstore on Church Street. She told me that the police had come to the bookstore and asked her to go with them to identify the body. She was visibly upset when you spoke to her.
Yes.
So, by this time now, you're still interested to make efforts for yourself to go and...
Yes, to go and view the body.
And
I asked Malcolm if he could take me to view the body, because Malcolm had seen the body. When we arrived at the funeral parlor, I was told that I could not see the body that day. We left and went to the police commissioner, but were told that he was unavailable. We have, however, Malcolm and I spoke to an Inspector Crandon, who told us as far as he knew the body had been released by police and there was no reason why we should not be able to see the body. We returned to the funeral parlor, but they still refused to give us permission to see the body. My lawyer went to the funeral home on a Sunday, but they told him they didn't work on Sundays.
do you remember who the lawyer was then?
My lawyer? Mine was Fitzpatrick.
In my that market,
Certainly.
when you told your colleague that her father was involved in an accident, she said that he didn't leave.
He's dead.
That he's dead.
He said he's dead, isn't he?
He's dead, isn't he? Did she hear before you spoke to her?
I think she just saw my state. My children are very tuned into me, and I try to hide things from them, but they could tell.
All in vain.
Yeah.
Thank you. Was she surprised though?
She was shocked. They were shocked. They were really shocked. She knew, I don't know how much they knew about other attempts made on his life, but she knew that other people had been killed. So I think they were very aware. I'm not sure if what they picked up in school. Because one of the things we had as a family was every Friday afternoon we would have a meeting where we sat down with the children and talked about what happened for that week, how they were doing in school, if they faced any problems at school. That was part of our Friday conversation. So I'm not sure if she heard anything prior to that.
Can you just, since we're on that point, can you in particular, how would you describe her relationship with her father?
She was the apple of his eye always. She was very much like him in terms of being studious at a very young age, a common entrance, went on to high school, excelled in school. She was always, she sat in his study most of the time. And she wrote poetry, she wrote short stories. She was always, and her father was she was very, very close to her dad.
And she was only about 9 at the time.
Yes,
You mean the town?
Yes.
yes. No, she was
She was
11.
being 11, Asha was being 9.
She was 9 at the time when she passed the common entrance.
Yes, yes. When she passed the common entrance, she was 9.
Okay, I think we were back on page 17. We had just, the lawyer had returned on Sunday, but told him he didn't work on Sundays.
Yeah. After that, Malcolm dropped me off at my house, which was a Saturday morning, and soon after, the American ambassador arrived to offer his condolences and offered me the assistance of his office. I declined. He also making funeral arrangements, and he offered to secure visas for us to travel to the U.S. I thanked the ambassador but declined, and he gave me his personal contact information and a sympathy card before he left.
I'm interested in that, so how do you explain that?
I have no explanation.
Walter was interested in the U.S.
Yes,
security service,
yes,
and he left the hospital over there at your house. Did you know the gentleman who came before?
this ambassador? Never. I knew other people in the embassy, but not that much. I've never met the ambassador before that Saturday morning, June the 14th.
What was your instinct about the visit? Was it genuine, or they wanted to make sure able to report he's dead with you?
I don't know if this was genuine. I never met the man before, but the experience I have, and if I could jump, when I got to Barbados, I went to the American Embassy to get a visa for Shaka to study in the U.S. And I said my name, and all the staff from the embassy came into the area where I was, and they said, one woman said, "This is the woman who refused." Can you imagine? This is the woman who refused the U.S. visa.
What was that within?
That was related to me now seeking a visa. He had offered us in Guyana a visa for my children and school in America. When I was in Barbados, Shaka had gained entry to a college in the U.S. and I had to get him a visa. And I went to the American Embassy.
Hold on, ma'am.
Within a week or two?
Within a week or two of being in Barbados, I went to the embassy because he was supposed to start school. He was supposed to go there in August to start school. And that's how I would feel.
That's how you were received,
Yes.
but you didn't get the visa.
We did get the visa.
But there was some concern that you were just saying you had refused the rights to
To U.S.
go to the land of the country,
Yes.
so.
Yes.
But along the way, you never got, even to this day, any explanation of why
I never saw or heard
they went
from the American at all. I knew the Canadian ambassador because his son and Shaka were good friends at Queen's College, but I never knew the American ambassador. He's not somebody who would have been a friend or we socialized with. As I said, we knew one or two people in the embassy, but not the ambassador.
Did they offer you assistance when you found?
He did offer assistance and a visa when he came that morning to go, make funeral arrangements and me and the children to the U.S., which I did not.
You didn't know what that assistance?
I don't know, and I wasn't interested.
Thank you.
at the top of page 18 and through to the bottom of the paragraph. This really represents your continued attempts to see your husband's body by that time. But I'm going to just read the top paragraph. On Monday, June 16, 1980, so this is about 3 days after, Father Rodriguez asked Crime Chief Skip Roberts why I was denied seeing my husband's body and why he was not being released to the family. Skip Roberts responded that I would be able to view the body at 4 p.m. that afternoon, but that he would have to determine whether the body could be released. At 4 p.m., Father Alton Rodriguez and I returned to the Newburgh funeral parlor, where Inspector McCrae and some other policemen were present. The funeral parlor was very depressing and not kept in a sanitary state. We all went in to see the body. It was in a huge, poorly working refrigerator with about 8 other bodies, some naked, some half naked. Walter's body was at the bottom of the pile. It was a dreadful experience. The next paragraph there, you describe an interaction between yourself and Inspector McCrae when he asked if you recognized your husband. And Father Rodriguez responded that I was in no position to answer that. The only way I could make such a statement, I told McCrae, was if he first refuted the state-reported rumor that I had seen the body before and refused to identify it. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. I was never, as I said, I didn't see the body immediately. I didn't see the body until that day. Malcolm had seen the body, and Malcolm reported the condition of his face, that beside the scars and the burns, it was very identifiable. He knew it was Walter. The inspector wanted me to say that I had refused, that I had come to the funeral parlor and refused to identify the body. And I said to him that I would only do that if he refuted his statement, because that was the first time I was seeing the body.
So this statement, how did you hear about this statement that they were saying that?
This was on the newspaper, and it was on the radio.
And you had refused to identify?
Yes.
Tell us then about the actual identification.
I was able to identify Walter's face immediately, despite his beard had been burnt on, and there was some cuts, but you could tell immediately it was Walter. Malcolm obviously knew the state of the rest of the body, and so he had told me that he didn't want me to see that, and I agreed that I wouldn't.
How long did it take? Sorry. I was just going to try to get down to the funeral, and then so that after that we wouldn't really be dealing with this difficult section.
After we...
What other factors informed the indications that you take away?
In your answer.
Very well, thank you. Mrs. Rodriguez, sorry to be interrupting you, but places at work. We normally take a break at this hour and there's not a signal and it's easy. So thank you very much. You come back. Thank you, back. So thanks very much. You yourself have some more knowledge about Thank Yes, and you're still on the road.
Yes, I
Yes, thank you.
Grateful Chair. Dr. Rodney, before we broke, I believe I can mention the fact that there was this 10-day period before which the body was released to the family.
Yes. During that 10 days, we decided that without the release of the body, whether they released it or not, we were going ahead and have a memorial service, which Father Malcolm helped us to organize at the Great Dance Cathedral.
And in the interim, you still pursue your goals of trying to get the body.
Yes, it was consistent.
And then,
What is the end was the explanation of that? Can she help us? That's what the experience that we have.
in your statement, you indicated that one officer at one stage said yes, the body would be released, and then you went acting on that information, and you found that it was not being released. Is that correct?
Yes. I can't give an explanation. No one gave me an explanation, but I surmise that with the information that had been put out before, that it was the body of an unidentified man, and then it turned out to be Walter, that they were holding the body, hoping, I don't know, the body would disintegrate or whatever, because the state we received the body in, we took it, when we finally got it and took it to another funeral parlor, Lee Funeral Parlor, I was told that normally they would never take a body in this condition. And the only reason that they were accepting the body because Walter and the owner had been at Queen's College together, they were friends. And so he took the body, but the coffin had to be closed.
How valid could be that suggestion that there was an explanation that the body could not be identified within 2 or 3 days you had identified the body? Who better to identify a body than a wife?
And it's correct that by that time, Father Malcolm had also...
He was the first person to recognize the body.
And
My sister had identified the body.
And they had brought his clothes.
They brought his clothes to my house. My sister brought the clothes to my house.
And she had received it from the police.
From the police.
Who gave it to her
Who
as
gave
a
it?
Walter.
Yes.
That funeral parlor, the first one, was it a general state of disrepair, or you had the impression?
I just felt the conditions generally in that funeral parlor was poor compared to others that I knew of, and I couldn't understand why the body was taken there.
from page 18 at the bottom, you described the funeral proceedings. And you indicated that because of the condition that you received the body in the casket had to remain closed.
Yes.
And then over on page 19, you described the attendance and so on. Can you just give us a little impression of the funeral from your point of view?
It was one of the largest funerals I've ever seen or experienced. People came from all over the world. Some people were denied entrance in coming into Guyana to attend the funeral. But people came from all over Guyana, from all walks of life. Lots of people walked for miles to attend the funeral. And it showed to me that people loved Walter. They cared. And so they came out of respect. And yeah.
And after the funeral now, you are in a position where your life has to change significantly. Can you just tell us some of your decision-making processes in the course of the period immediately after the the funeral and so on, because we know that by the 30th you are on your way.
I'm sorry, Mr. Houston, just before that, she has told us of the great outpouring of support, but was there any reaction or response from the government or security personnel in relation to this great outpouring and support at the funeral procession, bearing in mind we're dealing with atmosphere and action?
Yes, the funeral was, we were surrounded at times by lots of police, lots of armed people. There were helicopters flying above. I think they expected that people would be, they expected something to happen, people to riot or something. But we were able to talk to people that this was not what Walter would have wanted. And so we wanted a peaceful send-off, that we weren't going to use this as an excuse for the government to use this as an excuse to slaughter people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Was the government represented at the funeral?
No, sir.
So I'm taking you then to the period, the days after the funeral, in terms of giving us an impression of what you and your family had to go through then, in terms of moving forward.
I didn't have a plan in place. I knew I had to leave. But our friends in Barbados, as George Lamin and Mrs. Margaret Hope, both came to the funeral. Margaret, our friendship go way back to England with the CLR game, James Study Group. And apparently, Walter had said to Margaret that if everything happened to him, she should come and make sure that we were okay. So Margaret Hope and George Lamin brought tickets and took us to Barbados. When I got to Barbados, I wasn't sure. I hadn't planned on what I would do, where I would go. I just wanted my children in a safe place, and I felt that Barbados was the safest place I could be. I didn't want to leave the Caribbean. I wanted my children to grow up in the Caribbean so they could have a sense of self. I've seen lots of kids growing up other places and they don't have any grounding about who they are and where they're from and their history. And I always wanted my children to have that experience. And Barbadians were gracious enough to welcome us into Barbados.
After Walter's death, did you receive condolences from heads of state?
Yes, all over the world.
Did you get this?
Yes.
Did you get it from Ireland?
No.
Dr. Rodney, can you give us some idea of how challenging or not challenging that period would have been for you immediately after leaving land?
Physically, emotionally, financially, it was very difficult. Even though Barbados is a Caribbean country and name, I had no relatives that I knew of in Barbados. So I was going to restart my life if I agreed to stay. Other countries offered that we should come to those countries, and I declined because to me, Barbados was the most politically stable place. It also had excellent schools. So if I had to remain in the Caribbean, I selected Barbados for that reason. And I think it's probably one of the best choices I've made in my life.
Counseling, did you all get counseling?
No.
You or the children?
No.
No.
Okay, Mark, do you think you might benefit from it?
I think so. My main concern is with the children. So I think I started, and every now and then it comes up, and that's because I think I never really had a period to grieve. I was focused on the well-being of my children. I want to make sure that they were okay. And so I did everything possible to make sure that that happened. To create an environment that would be healing for them. So my focus was on getting them to school, finding a job for myself, and Walter was the one who pushed me towards finishing my degree in Jamaica, and I'm glad I did because that gave me some choices in terms of working in Barbados. I'm also a trained nurse, so I could have gotten a job as a nurse in the hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but that would have meant working odd hours. And so with my social work degree, I was able to get a job as a medical social worker at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which gave me the time frame that they would be home from school and I could be there. For several months, for a long time we stayed with friends, Mrs. Hope, and then other people would be traveling and give us our house to stay in for periods. And then a very good friend of ours, I think you all know, Basil Springer, gave us a house. We rented a house, but he gave us a house to stay in as long as we wanted to stay. And so, in that process, pardon?
Is that person is very weak?
Yes. Yeah. But they were all friends of UE. And so, gradually trying to build some normalcy for the children in Barbados and growing up, and creating a space so that their friends, they could have their friends in that environment with them at all home. It was very costly because lots of these kids ate incessantly, and I could see all here, they would eat when they were at my house during the summer. So I was very poor, but I know that my children were safe and happy and they had good friends, and I had a good Caribbean family around me, not just Guyanese who lived in Barbados, but also people from Trinidad, Jamaica, who made me feel welcome in society.
Thank you. When you reflect on the society that you knew in Guyana growing up in the 50s, I think in your statement you indicated that you enjoyed growing up. So you have this period of a normal, happy life growing up in Guyana. You have your courtship with Walter. You go then from Guyana, you went then to England, and from England to Jamaica. In Jamaica,
England and Tanzania.
England, Tanzania, then to Jamaica.
And then back to Tanzania.
That's right. Was there ever any time that Walter behaved in a fashion, as far as you're aware, that warranted his being ill-treated by the state?
No. Walter was an educator, and I qualified as saying he was a teacher, educator, and somebody who wanted to mobilize the masses. Walter, I don't think that warranted the kind of the kind of pressures that were put on him.
Now, people will point to his being made persona non grata in Jamaica. When that order, for want of a better term, was made, where was Walter?
Walter was on a plane that had just landed. Walter had gone to a conference, the Black Writers Conference in Montreal, Canada, himself and Bobby Hill, Dr. Bobby Hill. And on their return to Jamaica, Walter was not allowed to get off of the plane, and the plane was sent back to Canada. Bobby was the one who came and told me that they weren't allowing Walter into the country. I know that the government had pressured the university, UWI, to fire Walter, and the university refused. They said Walter was one of their best lecturers they had on campus, and there was no reason, they couldn't find any reason to fire him. And then the government came up with this, that Walter was a danger to Jamaican society, and they were declaring him persona non grata. So I was left in Jamaica with Shaka. Shaka was about 2.5, if that was about around that age.
In that page 4 of your statement, in the penultimate paragraph on page 4, you describe Walter's crimes. At any time were you all ever told, well, the reasons for his being banned from Jamaica?
Never. Not under any administration. I mean, there were reasons created that he associated with Rastafarian, that he demonized or he didn't like the middle class. Very spurious reasons, but no.
But no, he was never told as far as you're aware.
No, he was never told.
In Tanzania, from 68 to 74, that's at page 5 of your statement, you describe your life there in very, very glowing terms. Can you just tell us a little bit about that period?
There's something special about Dar es Salaam. It's called City of Peace, and I fell in love with East Africa immediately. That was my first trip to Africa. And I fell in love with Tanzania, the warmth of the people. Walter traveled ahead of us. He was appointed while we were in London. And so Walter traveled ahead, and I followed, because I just had Shaka. So I traveled when Shaka was 3 weeks old to Tanzania. And that was our first contract period, which was the academic year. And Walter very quickly fitted into the environment on campus. Dialoguing with students. Walter was probably younger than most of the students, so people thought he was a student at first. Most of the students were older than he was. So Tanzania was, after England, Tanzania was a breath of fresh air, I would say. And it was also warm, moving from England. And it seemed the perfect place to be.
So you all enjoyed very much?
Very much. We made many, many friends. I still have very, very close relationships with friends in Tanzania.
And it's after Tanzania that Walter was able to make it on his promise to himself, if not to others, that he would return to Ghana.
Well, it wasn't that first. Tanzania was 2 blocks. The first block, when we finished that, is when we went to Jamaica, 68. We got to Jamaica in January 68, and Walter was declared persona non grata on October 16th. After that, it's the second period then we went to Tanzania.
And that carries you right through to 74.
This is 74.
And both of the girls were born.
Both of them were born in Tanzania.
After that, your King Diana, essentially from 74 to 19.
18.
Take it back to my little, just for sure, but.
I had a feeling that you would share with more to have.
Really enjoyed my little, so. How long did it take you to get employment?
To be exact. I think we went there.
Hospital or the transport board?
No, that was my second position at Transport Board. I think we were there at the end of June. I started work at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in September. What had happened at the hospital that the head of the social work department was going on leave, extended leave, and so they needed somebody. So my position at a QEH would have been short term. It would have been about a year, but she was on leave. And she was Canadian. She was marked up Barbadian. And at a point, they never returned. But I couldn't take up the appointment permanently because it was a public service appointment. And as a non-Barbadian, I'm told I couldn't be appointed as a civil service. That's what I was told. And then after I left the hospital, I went to the transport board.
It took you about 3 months before you got.
About 3 to 4 months.
You would know the discriminatory experience because you were not validated.
Well, people would say, it was on the radio once. I don't want to call the lady's name, but she said how Rodney came to take away jobs from Barbadians.
How many jobs did I
I know. And then my house that I lived in, I was told that the Prime Minister had bought me this house, and I said, if the Prime Minister is buying my house, it surely won't be in this neighborhood. It was a nice neighborhood, but if he was going to buy me a house, I would decide where he bought the house. But there were not those kinds of petty things that I refused to take seriously, But most people were very, very generous. Even when I remember working at QEH and people would talk about all these foreigners coming in and taking, but they would never refer to me as a foreigner. I said, but I am. And said, no, you're different, or you're special, you're part of us. So you got both sides of it. But most people were not ungracious.
large majority work with.
But once you're in the employment scenario, tell us what your experiences in there when you returned to that.
To work?
Was employment?
As I mentioned, I came back before water, and I applied for a job at the Georgetown City Council. And Georgetown City Council has a section that deals with, I think, health. And there was a position open for a matron of a daycare center in East Randolph, and I applied for the position because that was the only vacant position, and I got that position. That was going really, really well. I think I made tremendous contribution in terms of training daycare workers in childhood development. Actually, the course I did with my staff subsequently became a university course at the University of Ghana, I'm told. with the workers, there was some tension sometimes. They would say, if I told them to do something, they said, we're going to get your head rolled, meaning they would complain to the party. Most of them identify themselves as belonging to the People's National Congress, and they said, you can't tell us what to do. And so, on one occasion, I had a visit by the mayor, who was then a woman, Mrs. Simon, because she had received all these complaints about me from workers. And so, and Mrs. Simon, by the way, is somebody I knew from my church. I go to the Methodist church, and her children and I grew up together. But now she was the mayor. She either didn't recognize me, or if she did, she didn't acknowledge it. So she said, she was very abrasive when she first came. She said, I come because I have all these complaints. And I said, I beg your pardon, could you tell me who you are? And she said, I am mayor. And I said, I'm so delighted to meet you. And that kind of diffused it. And so I said, why don't you come into my office and we could talk about it. So I took her into my office, I offered her a cup of tea, and we started talking. She told me about all the complaints. And then she said, what do you have to say? And I said, well, this is the attitude of some of the workers. They're late, they don't come to work on time, they're absent without excuses. And they say it's because I can't do them anything, they'll get my head rolled because they're against members. And so she said, okay. And she left and went back to the city council. And some of the other nurses at the city council called me up and said, what happened to you and the mayor? Because she was down here and she said, anything Mrs. Rodney wanted in terms of this daycare, she said that immediately. So all the things that hadn't been done in years were done immediately. She was now on my side.